Okay, Dane, are you there?
Yeah, I hear you still. And I listened to what you said, Russ. I was listening for a minute or two, and certainly we see the same phenomenon here, although we see back and forth. Some days we'll have those trails that appear to dissipate, but then the wispy clouds start to form, the haze starts to sink in, the silvery white haze, and certainly they're still spraying as well. And we know from NOAA's initial data on a naturally occurring condensation trail, and that data can't be found in the net anymore, but it was 70 below zero, 70% humidity. You don't have that very often, only for the smallest, short-lived, almost transparent trail. So any trail of any significance we see is almost a sure bet it's a particulate trail. On the methane issue, I mean, everybody is seeing more spraying.
Hey, Dane?
Yes.
Dane, excuse me, I'm sorry. Before you get into that, could you just introduce yourself and tell us all who you are for the people who listen to the recording and don't know you?
Yeah, a little bit of a bio here. I'm sorry. I'm with the website geoengineeringwatch.org. Michael Murphy and myself, there's a few of us that are part of that site. I have a background with Bechtel Power Corporation in renewable energy. Worked on one of the first commercial solar plants in the continental U.S. My home was on the world's largest renewable energy magazine. That's how I got onto this issue. I'd been told about it, but it was frankly very skeptical. And when I moved to Northern California expecting clean air with a very large, completely off-grid home and started to lose on some days 50, 60, 70, even 80% of my solar uptake from these intermittent grid patterns, clearly something was wrong. Something was going on in the sky. Quickly came on the subject of geoengineering, and my life has been on hold ever since, over a decade. Prior to this, my area of study and research was climate change and the atmosphere, and that, of course, tailed right into this. And so this is the majority of what I've done for the last 10 years. Not a battle I wanted in any sense, but one I just simply felt if it was not stopped, nothing else would matter. I feel that more than ever today. And if on the temperature anomalies we see, I'm sure everybody's seen these wild swings in temperature, and it's very apparent now they are doing massive manipulation with the jet stream in conjunction with the aerosols. And my conclusion on that, and we can go into Q&A here in a minute because I like that best anyway, but I believe that the planet is in full-blown meltdown. I'm not an Al Gore fan. I'm not a carbon credit fan, but that does not change the reality on the ground. Geoengineering appears to be, from my research, the largest single causal factor. We've been not very kind to the planet. I don't think anybody can argue that one, but geoengineering is by far the largest wrench in the works that appears to have triggered climate feedback loops. One of those feedback loops is methane expulsion, which appears to be completely released or triggered at this point, and that in conjunction with the shredded ozone layer is certainly a result of geoengineering. We are in uncharted territory, and the methane expulsion is not a century-long event. It's not a decade-long event. It happens over the course of a few years, and all available data indicates it's happening now, and this is a global game-changing event. And the paradox is, again, geoengineering appears to be one of the largest single causal factors, the largest causal factor, because geoengineering alters wind patterns along with HARP, which then alters ocean currents. Now we have ocean currents that used to turn south from the Atlantic before they went into the Arctic. Now they go straight into the Arctic. That's part of the reason the methane hydrates have thawed. Shredded ozone, another reason they've thawed. And so as the methane releases, many people might have heard that methane is 20 times more potent than CO2 as a greenhouse gas. But in fact, that's over a 100-year time horizon. Over a 10-year time horizon, it's over 100 times more potent. So the magnitude of this cannot be overstated. And the reservoir that's releasing in the East Siberian Shelf of the Arctic is massive, and it has the potential to extinguish life on Earth, that reservoir alone. So, again, the paradox is the more they spray, the more they apparently feel they have to spray in order to cover up the damage they've already done. It's painting us straight into a corner, but it's all they know how to do. It's all they're geared to do. It's what their money-making bonanza is. So anyway, I feel at this point, and I'll go into Q&A here in a second, that we are really at the apex here, and the temperatures are changing radically. There's temperatures in some places in the Arctic, right, in the last 30, 45 days that have been 50 degrees above normal. And there's huge swings. There's other areas that have been below normal, like Alaska. But it just depends on where they're ice nucleating, which, if anybody doesn't know what that is, it appears that almost every precipitation event now is being ice nucleated. That's chemical nucleation. It's a chemical process by which snow can be created at, according to the patents we have, of up to 50 degrees. We see the same thing happening on the ground. Shouldn't be snowing at those temperatures, obviously, but as this nucleation process continues, it appears to cool the air mass below it temporarily. And in Northern California, we had temperatures as low as 20 degrees below some 2-3 weeks back, not far from where I live, and now we're up pushing 80 degrees. And same thing, Atlanta, a little over a week ago, Atlanta, Georgia was 85 degrees. It snowed 3 days later. People should really question this, obviously, and the nucleation process appears to be their last card. We don't know what's in these chemicals. We're seeing very anomalous snow that stays frozen, and ponds that are packed with this stuff that stay frozen long after freezing temperatures are gone. The chemical nucleation process appears to continue on, actually gassing some of the water out of those ponds. They're doing over Siberia right now, is completely buried in snow. The radar, we can see them ice nucleating. You can see what was a rain cell that flashes out the snow as it's got this material dumped on it. So anyway, I'll go to Q&A, but I believe right now that what they have triggered is so cataclysmic, and paleo data backs this up, paleoclimatic data, that they now are in total desperation trying to cover up what they've helped to cause. And now the stakes are as high as they could be. And even to put this in perspective, the Arctic Methane Emergency Group, AMEG is the acronym, a lot of geoscientists there, Ken Caldera is one, if anybody's familiar with his name, but their latest proposals to stop this methane are to use the ionosphere heaters, which are the HAARP facilities around the globe, and try to use opposing frequencies to nuke the atmosphere in a desperate and completely destructive attempt to degrade the methane before it completely saturates the atmosphere. So this is total desperation mode, and I think that we're all in for quite a ride from here. But my belief from all my research is that if they don't stop geoengineering, if they don't allow the planet to respond, if they don't allow the hydrological cycle to resume, quit poisoning the boreal forests, quit shredding the ozone layer, if they don't allow the planet to respond on its own, I believe our future looks bleak indeed.
Dane, it was just a couple months ago I first heard about the methane issue. I'd never heard that before. And could you explain how that works to people who've never heard about that? I think a lot of people have not even heard about that before. Methane, I mean, how is the spraying actually facilitating the methane release in a positive feedback cycle?
Again, I can't in good conscience hang it completely around the neck of geoengineering. I mean, we certainly have done great harm to our planet. But that being said, it does appear that geoengineering is the single greatest causal factor. Again, there are certain issues that are crystal clear scientifically. The geoengineering particulates shred ozone, period. There is absolutely no debate scientifically about that fact. We have massive northern and southern hemisphere ozone holes. Really all available data points toward geoengineering being the cause, not CFCs, not chlorofluorocarbons, but geoengineering, as they've been at this for about 6 decades, and that's about the time the ozone holes, southern hemisphere started to develop, northern hemisphere shortly after. And so you have more of the sun's thermal energy penetrating the atmosphere now. You have, although they can create, and they do, between HAARP maneuvering the jet stream and the ice-nucleated particulates and the simple blocking of the sun, they can and do create massive cooling events over huge areas. But it absolutely appears to be at the cost of a much worsened overall warming. So it truly is cutting your nose off to spite your face. And as they alter, as I mentioned earlier, they alter wind currents, which alters ocean currents. Now you have warm water going to the Arctic. Methane is the greatest source of carbon that has the potential to release from the atmosphere, bar none. And this one reservoir alone in the East Siberian Shelf is thought to contain some 10,000 gigatons of methane. This is frozen methane on the sea floor. If only 60 of that 10,000 gigatons released, that would increase by 400% the total greenhouse gas to date. Only 60 of that 10,000. So you can get an idea of the magnitude of that. If any significant percentage of that reservoir releases, it's game over on planet Earth. So I don't think they can hide this for long. It's changing temperatures by the day, and I think they will try to spin geoengineering into some last-ditch save-all, and it's important that enough people understand it's not a cure but a curse, so that when they try to sell this to us, people will already know better. But that's how the methane is released. It's been happening for many decades. Bermuda Triangle, that's methane release, not aliens. When these methane fields release, it aerates the ocean like a bottle of champagne. Ships have no buoyancy, they go to the bottom. So this has been happening for a long time. But the Arctic reservoir is very, very large, and it's also acidifying the ocean. As the methane releases, much of it dissolves in the seawater as it reaches the surface, and the oceans are acidifying right now at breakneck speed. So this is a multi-edged sword, and none of it good.
Okay, so to make this simple for people, they're shredding the ozone layer. More sunlight is reaching the methane depots or these methane reservoirs, and then the methane is being released, causing a further heating, which is then increasing. It's acting like positive feedback and just increasing the whole cycle. Is that basically right in a nutshell?
Yes, but it's more of the sun's thermal energies, not necessarily direct sunlight, because, again, global dimming right now, another term many are not familiar with, is fully 20% on planet Earth. That means over the last 5 decades, 20% of the sun's direct rays no longer reach the surface of the planet, again a result of geoengineering. So, I mean, the amount of decimation being caused by geoengineering, it can't be quantified. Again, it's shredding the ozone, altering wind currents, releasing methane, poisoning everything that lives, the boreal forests, which are the lungs of the planet, the northern latitude forests, Siberia, the Pacific Northwest. I spent my life in the forest, and it looks absolutely horrific. I just came in prior to making this call, and the devastation is cataclysmic. And so now you have these forests that were the lungs of the planet that were a carbon sink that absorbed carbon. Now they are a carbon source. They're emitting carbon because they are dying. So, there's nothing that's not being harmed by geoengineering. It is harming everything. But the sun's thermal energy, Russ, again, it's not always in the form of direct sunlight, and it's like a cloudy day on the beach. You can still get sunburnt. And another part of this feedback loop is the Arctic ice cap. Many people, the global warming debate rages on, and it really should not. Although there is a small section of Antarctica that has, in fact, increased the sea ice slightly, and that we fully believe is from ice nucleation, areas that it did not snow before, did no precipitation because it was too cold. The air didn't contain enough moisture to precipitate. Now it does have enough moisture. It is precipitating, and there's sea ice forming, but that doesn't mean it's getting colder. It's not getting colder. And in the case of the Arctic ice cap, it almost completely imploded this year. Media is not covering this. During most of the melt season, the Arctic ice cap was losing 100,000 square kilometers of surface area a day. Near the end of the ice season, the melt season, it was 130,000 square kilometers a day. It's not expected to last more than 2 or 3 more years. No ice. Again, back to the methane. Instead of the surface of the ice reflecting 90% of the sun's thermal energy, now the sea absorbs 90+% of that thermal energy. So add that increased absorption of sunlight from the open seawater, add the ocean currents that are now delivering warm water, add the increased thermal energy from the sun, from the shredded ozone. Bad mix, bad combination. Methane releases, causes heating, more ice melt, more absorption, positive feedback loop. Very, very clear, easy to understand.
All right, let me ask you some hard questions real quick, because I know everybody is asking themselves this, and they respect what you think, and they'd like to know what you think. I think. How long until this process affects every soul on Earth? How long till it's an actual, something that nobody, even the people who are trying to deny most and go on with their lives, have to deal with?
Based on the data I see, I don't believe they'll be able to hide this past the end of this year. Perhaps not even that long. And I believe that the ramifications from this event are unfolding so rapidly that I feel it's certainly a strong probability that some event might be laid on us to just distract from everything unfolding. Maybe they'll start World War III, maybe a false flag event or something. This is purely speculation. I have no knowledge of that, obviously, but based on the ramifications of the imploding environment, and again, to put this in a little more perspective, Russ, the species extinction rate today is somewhere between 100,000% of normal background extinction and 1,000,000% of normal background extinction. That's between 1,000 and 10,000 times normal background. We're losing as much as 200 species a day. We are in the 6th great mass extinction on planet Earth right now, today, and you can't hide that for long. You have fish stocks imploding. 93% of global pelagic fish stocks are now depleted. 93%. Now the bottom of the food chain, mackerel, herring, those are just starting to implode now completely. The previous methane mass expulsion, okay, we have paleo data to go on here. From 55 million years ago, the PETM event, Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, was a methane mass expulsion event. And it's felt that there was about, it depends on what model, what study you look at, but as much as 70% terrestrial extinction and perhaps over 90% ocean extinction. So, this is no joke, and it's going to change. But again, if they stopped geoengineering, that is our best chance. They can only hurt the Earth's climate systems that are trying to compensate for what's happening. But when they seed the atmosphere, they stop cyclonic rotation, they stop ozone regeneration, they thwart the hydrological cycle, they poison what rain that does fall. It's doing nothing but harm. Geoengineering needs to stop.
You said a word about the docks. Pelagic, is that what you said?
Pelagic fish populations. Those are the greatest food stock fish. The tuna, the mackerel. Those are pelagic fish.
Okay, so we're losing that on a massive scale right now.
They're 93% depleted globally already. 93%. I mean, the only reason they catch anything is because their fishing methods are so incredibly sophisticated. But you have the ocean acidifying at the same time, in addition to Fukushima radiation and 1,000 other things. But ocean acidification is happening perhaps 1,000 times faster than the PETM event I just mentioned 55 million years ago. So we are on a jet engine ride to a whole new reality. And again, I know my message is very dire, my conclusions are very dire, but first it has to matter to us to try to raise awareness on this. For every single individual we reach, that has to matter in and of itself. That makes the effort matter. And two, no one can say how this will unfold. No one. And again, our best bet by far is for the planet to be allowed to respond, for people to understand what's happening, and not for these completely clinically insane people to fly untold thousands of jets around day in, day out, and completely thwarting all of Earth's life support systems. And that's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, I have to say that I agree with I know there was just speculation about probably they may have a distraction or false flag or something that will distract everybody. That's putting all the pieces together. I have to agree with that speculation that's probably what they're going to do. Now, so by doing chemtrails, by doing this so-called geoengineering, it sounds like they're obviously making the problem worse. Can't help but to believe they know exactly what they're doing. What do you think? They know they're making it worse, but maybe there's some reason behind it, or any thoughts on that?
I think there could be a couple angles. I mean, I think that on one hand, they know it's going to collapse, period, and so they don't care. And I always have to bring up the issue of 1,800 plus nuclear detonations on planet Earth. I mean, what sane group of people would do that? I mean, exposing themselves absolutely positively, strontium-90 in all of our bones, everything was contaminated from those 1,800 detonations blowing up beautiful South Sea islands. Why would anybody do that? I mean, there's no sanity in this equation, certainly. But I believe, in having spoken to Ken Caldera and having spoken to David Keith at the Geoengineering Conference in San Diego, that from my perspective, I don't think there's a lot of rational thinking in this equation. Not at all. They live in bubbles where the consequences of their actions don't appear to be relevant to them. And so we're dealing with, in my opinion, a complete lack of deductive reasoning here, with no comprehension as to the consequences of their actions. So it's hard to say, Russ, but I believe also that the vast majority of people involved in these programs, the vast majority, have no idea what they're doing. They are being told they're doing something that's going to save the planet, something benevolent, something necessary, and those are the people we need to reach. Those are the people who need to understand that they are sucking the noose around their own neck along with the rest of us. And I would hope that once they realize that, they would refuse to participate in this insanity.
Yeah, agreed. You had mentioned, we can go to Q&A in just a second, but a couple questions I've heard from a lot of people. We keep seeing this pattern of everything is dying. I had 4 different vegetables die off during 2 weeks of intense spraying this summer. I have a garden. I've learned gardening the last 3 weeks, which I love. And all of a sudden, 4 different vegetable types they all died. And it came right with 2 weeks of spraying. You just mentioned you came in with you're working with a dozer. You're seeing the decimation of forests. What are you seeing with the plant life there, and how is that going to play into this?
Again, the geoengineering is the elephant in the room. It's the main cause of decimation in many, if not most, forested areas right now. Back to the species extinction, as much as 200 species a day going extinct. This is the important factor of this. It is thought that 70 to 80% of those extinctions, plant and animal, are fungally related. So when you poison the soils, when you saturate them with bioavailable, toxic, deadly heavy metals, you kill the soil microbes. You kill the life of the soil. And what moves in when there's a clean slate? Fungus. And fungus is decimating everything from the oak trees to the some of the conifers and and every other thing from top to bottom, including people. Fungal sinusitis epidemic now. Fungus is a very slow, insidious problem, and it's absolutely connected. The decimation of the forest, certainly we're seeing die off. We're seeing trees that are weak. When trees and many other organisms when their roots sense bioavailable aluminum, there's studies on this in particular, so I'll use aluminum as an example, but they shut down to protect their DNA from damage. So they don't uptake nutrients, so they die a very slow, protracted death. And in the case of the forests in the Pacific Northwest, everybody says, oh, it's just the beetles. The beetles are only a symptom of a weak tree, a tree that has been poisoned. So, all roads lead back to geoengineering. Again, if they had not been doing this for 60 years, I believe we would be in exponentially better shape. Now, it doesn't mean that we haven't damaged the planet. Again, any notion that that has not occurred is just not looking at reality. But geoengineering, I believe, the biggest single causal factor, and if they had never started this, I believe we would be in a much better position. But as it sits right now, we are in free fall to an unknown reality.
Okay, and you mentioned the biologically available aluminum. Now, soils naturally have a lot of bauxite, which they get aluminum from through manufacturing process. But that's completely different because that doesn't affect the plants the same way newly introduced free biologically available aluminum does. Is that correct?
That's completely correct, because this comes up so many times from these geoengineering disinformation sites and people, and that aluminum is 8% of the Earth's crust, and it is. But aluminum does not exist in the environment in free form, period. always bonded to other elements, not bioavailable. It certainly doesn't blow around in the wind as they have tried to claim. You know, when I first dove into my research here, I talked to a hydrogeologist, one of the first people I talked to, and he was aghast at the aluminum reading I had in my rain, and said, you know, you shouldn't have anything, you know, even 1 part per billion in your rain unless you live next to an Alcoa factory. Those his words exactly. My first test in the rain was 7 parts per billion of aluminum, already very high considering where I live. Subsequent tests over the next 6 years rose as much as almost 50,000% from that already high reading to 3,450 parts per billion in a single rain event. I mean, this is highly toxic rain. Snow, where this aluminum accumulated off the side of Mount Shasta, has been measured as high as 61,000 parts per billion. And nobody's talking, and people know, Russ. I mean, I've talked to NOAA scientists 6 months ago off the record. They absolutely know. I just had another meeting with the environmental waste in Northern California. They have, you know, tests from the Sacramento River that are spiking in aluminum, but they're afraid to say anything. And it's like, you know, everybody's worried about their 8 to 5 job while we're all sinking at breakneck speed into total extinction, literally. So I hope if we can reach critical mass, and academia knows. I mean, I don't think there's a meteorologist out there that doesn't know this is going on, or a biologist that's involved with any type of forestry issue. And if we could just break the dam, I think it would break from 100 different directions.
All right. Well, thanks so much for this information. I have one question before we go to Q&A. And that is, we've talked about this before in some of our other conversations we've had, but they have the ability to prohibit rain as well. We've seen droughts. I've seen rain predicted all the time here. I mean, this has been the pattern, and it's a running joke in our neighborhood where the weatherman says, oh, we got rain coming in, we got storms coming in. The clouds roll over us. They look like they're in a storm. They never drop anything. How do they do that?
Okay, first, when you saturate the atmosphere with particulates, you diminish and disperse rainfall, period. I don't care what the particulates are. And we know this from, for example, Mount Pinatubo in 1992, not so significant eruption, but 1992 until, you know, the last 2 or 3 years was the lowest global precipitation ever recorded, 50% lower than the next lowest year. Now, geoengineering was going on then, but just the addition of particulates from Pinatubo saturated the atmosphere with enough particulates to diminish rainfall that much. Several reasons for that. When you block the sun, it's photons that break the molecules loose in water and cause evaporation. So you block sunlight, you dramatically thwart evaporation, period. Next, when you put too many condensation nuclei into these storms, and that's what they do when the storms are approaching, and many people have seen this, the AR, the atmospheric river, in front of that storm, that's where there's a tremendous amount of water. They seed the hell out of that. They spray the hell out of it when these storms are approaching. The storms are always late and always less than they forecast. Those condensation nuclei, when it's saturated, the droplets don't combine and fall as rain, but they adhere to those condensation nuclei, creating a massive, massive artificial rainless cloud, featureless sky that can cover thousands of miles in distance. And at some points we saw, when they were seeding the AR that was a strong tropical jet, we saw artificial clouds stretching from the west coast to the east coast. Almost no precipitation in the whole thing, seeding the hell out of it. So the particulates diminish and disperse rain, period. Now, it's felt, and there's some Norwegian researchers and German researchers that I've been communicating with. They reached out to us at the site, and they feel that some of these particulates, and they're showing fluoride in some of their tests now, 60-plus tests had fluoride, that if these particulates of certain elements are exposed to a certain radio frequency, i.e. HARP, those particulates tend to clump together again, which means as they see this artificial cloud and it's drifting across, you know, the continent, if they want it to precip over a certain area, they can expose that cloud to a certain signal, which would cause those particles to clump together to form bigger condensation nuclei and cause rain wherever they choose, toxic rain. But so anyway, this is some of the workings that we feel we have a pretty good understanding of.
Okay, wow, that is amazing. That's the first time I've heard. I've heard about the fluoride. I've talked to you before about the fluoride a little bit, but I never heard about the clumping with radio frequency. So that would be a complete cycle for a complete system for modulating rainfall. Sounds like to me it could possibly exist.
But overall rainfall globally is down. And there simply is no other explanation but the geoengineering particulate cocoon around the whole planet, because for every degree of warming on planet Earth, the atmosphere holds 7% more moisture. It should be raining more, not less. There is no other explanation but geoengineering.
Absolutely. I've seen this for years happen. Now, because I keep telling everybody I can smell and taste chemtrails, I don't mean to be repetitive about that, but for the new people who are with us, I just want you to understand this is why I keep making these comments about, for instance, before a storm would approach us, they would spray the heck out of us for 12 to 24 hours. This pattern was so apparent to me when I would keep an eye on the satellites, the radar and satellites, and saw a storm coming my way. I knew 12, 24 hours before the arrival of that storm, we were going to be buried and I was going to be suffering. So I've just seen this pattern for a long time. Well, thank you for all that info, Dane. I'd like to go into QA mode and let people ask questions. Anyone who wants to ask a question, you can unmute, or you can raise your hand effectively by pressing *6 on your phone. So let's go into QA mode. After you hear us go into QA mode, hit *6 if you'd like to ask a question. All right, so go ahead and hit *6 if you'd like to ask a question of Dane. We've got people lining up here, Dane, so let's go with the first one. Here we go. Okay, whoever's just unmuted, go ahead.
Hi, Dane. This is Deborah Whitman, Environmental Voices, and thank you so much for your talk this evening. I was wondering if you could repeat the website that you mentioned that Ken Caldera has, and then also some websites on the methane so that people can do some research on that issue.
Dane, can you hear us? You know what? Let me make sure Dane didn't get cut off in the Q&A session. Excuse me for just a second. There we go. Sorry, Dane. Hold on.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep, gotcha. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
And I can hear you. Hi, Dane. This is Deborah Whitman, Environmental Voices. How are you?
Good. I got your question. I could hear you guys.
Oh, excellent. Great.
So I got your question, but hey, good to hear from you, Deb. And again, Ken Caldera is involved with AMEG. That's the Arctic Methane Emergency Group. The acronym is AMEG, and you can find their site online under Arctic Methane Emergency Group. Easy to find.
Thank you. And what about some other websites? Are there any others on that issue?
On methane, if you you can find some data on the Arctic News blog spot. You can find that. You can find the Arctic Sea Ice blog is another one. Now, again, these mostly scientists and researchers on some of these sites that blog. Now, I have placed comment as part of the dialogue there, but literally laughed out of the forum for even mentioning the word geoengineering. And again, this is the bubbles that these people live in. They just want to stay in their little alternate reality and mock those that are willing to recognize the elephant in the room. So they certainly are.
We know that they're getting big money for doing geoengineering research, so that could be one reason. But my big concern, as we mentioned, is that trees and algae make the oxygen we breathe, and they're dying so rapidly. This is so critical, and I don't understand why people, aren't getting out and doing more. And hopefully they will. And we just need to figure out a way to get these stopped. That's
awesome.
That's our goal, Deb. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Deborah. Okay.
Dane,
when you hear your phone unmute, go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, Dane, can you hear me?
I hear you good.
Okay, this is Michelle in Kansas, and I've got kind of a two-part question. My first question is just I would like to hear your opinion. You know, out there's the theory that this has to also do with trying to purposefully depopulate the world. Do you believe that at all?
Well, I'll say this. We have the Rosalind Peterson, who's done a tremendous amount of research. She's deserves lots of accolade, but the Navy reports from the late 90s on the lethal effects of these particulates that they are spraying. So there's no question they know how lethal this stuff is, and they're doing it anyway. So although I don't believe it's an immediate goal, because I know with the materials we recognize as being available, if they chose to get rid of all of us, they could do it with one flyover, and that would be it. We'd all be done. That being said, there is absolutely no question that a sickened population doesn't tend to protest much, and they absolutely know what they're dumping on us, and they're doing it anyway. So, and the planet statistically cannot support this population. Nothing even close to it. They know this. So, one must conclude that they are continuing, and they know how lethal it is. So whether that's, I don't necessarily think that's a primary goal, but I think that there's plenty of layers to this onion. So I'm trying to be a little ambiguous, I guess, but I don't believe they have our best interests in mind. I'll say that.
Okay.
Absolutely.
My second part to the question is, I've been doing all I can here to inform people and that kind of thing. And I've got, I had a little gathering here in my town of 1,200, and I had 21 people here. Most of the people that came are already aware and, know about chemtrails. So kind of my next step is what do I do from here with the people that already know? Who do we contact? It seems almost impossible, you can't get the legislators or senators to do anything. You can't, what should be our next step once we're aware and, wanting to fight it?
Extremely important question. And I would say this, legislatively we will never get anywhere. The system's bought, sold, paid for. They've been setting it up for this for many decades. I think they truly believe they could carry this on indefinitely. That could not be further from the truth. So the entire system is rigged not to show these particulates. So we need to reach the people and not waste our time with agencies. And everybody can do that from their own home computer. Find groups that would care if they only had a clue. Farm groups, environmental groups, ADD, Alzheimer's, autism. Some of the big fishing organizations are wondering why their streams are all dying. The list is almost endless of people that would care if they had a clue. Get credible data. Send them a credible email with a couple good articles. I call these flaming arrows. We all need to be shooting these flaming arrows from our home computer. Journalists that focus on environmental issues but something very thought out, credible article. Cite for more data. Geoengineeringwatch.org. Our site is one site. Even get an address. Mail a copy of Michael Murphy's film, Why in the World Are They Spraying, and put an article or two in there. That doesn't cost much to do. And we all, since there's so few of us, the best thing we can do is to try to start these spot fires with people who are absolutely personally being horrifically affected and would care if they really got it, if they really accepted this was going on. And to add to that, I would say they will no longer have the option of denying this, because I don't think this lump will fit under the rug much longer. So even if it doesn't start an immediate fire, it'll smolder there, and when they start to see everything imploding around them, I believe those seeds will find fertile ground. So we can all, if there's an organized campaign to locate groups, organizations, and individuals that would care, journalists, if they knew, and send out data. Just keep sending it out, and mail films. Make copies of Murphy film at 25 cents a copy for a DVD or 50. Just continue to shoot out those flaming arrows. With the few of us there are, that's the most effective thing we can do.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Okay, next caller. Go ahead.
Okay, this is Ann Fillmore, Dr. Fillmore on the Oregon coast. And first of all, let me say that whatever we come up with as far as like masks and so on, everyone that I know of, 3 out of 4 people that I know of on the Oregon coast is sick. They are sick. I've been sick for 2 days. I mean, really sick. And it's fungus-derived. This is not flu. The disease vector is nothing. I mean, I know disease vectors. This is not flu. This is mold. And they've been doing the Santa Ana and the mold. At any rate, the question is, and it may be just my own personal desire to have an answer, but why is the Oregon coast hit so badly? I mean, we are really, really hit badly all the time.
Thank you for the question. I think all your observations are spot on. And as far as why you guys get hit so hard is simply because the moisture moves across you. The normal,
thank you. No, sorry.
It's simply because of your geographic location. And the whole Pacific Northwest is getting hammered because that's where the moisture moves across. So they pound the heck out of us. I mean, we post on geoengineeringwatch.org satellite imagery of the eastern Pacific. It covers everything off the coast from you for several thousand miles out. Absolute constant blanket spraying of the eastern Pacific day in, day out, nonstop. They never let up, with only rare exceptions. So all that particulate matter comes in. Even when you see somewhat clear skies, it's still blowing in. And on the masks and filters, we're talking about, according to the patents, particles that are 10 nanometers in range. A nanometer is 1/1000th of a meter. You cannot filter that out with any mask, any conventional mask.
Oh, no, it goes in your eyes, too. I mean, it goes in all over.
Well, yeah, fungal infection can start in numerous locations. So, I mean, it's, again, the entire web of life is being completely thwarted. Whenever you kill off the natural bacteria, same in a human body, correct? And then the fungus ensues after, once there's a clean slate. And the same is true throughout the environment. So what we've done here, and this is from a practitioner here locally that has given us a bit of advice on prescription that works, to take a 2-ounce nasal sprayer bottle, fill it with water, half a pack of neti pot salts, 1 drop of tea tree oil, 1 drop of grapefruit seed extract, and 1 drop of eucalyptus oil, and just as a constant regime seems to help keep that infection from starting, and so I know this is not some major scientific mix, but it sure seems to work. And
thank you so much. No, because that's what I'm going to start putting in my neti pot, I'll tell you.
It works really well, and we use the nasal sprayer where you're just actually you can have a mixture with you all the time instead of rinsing your whole sinus. Just both nostrils and actually inhale some of it, a couple times a day, and it's really helped with people who are just struggling all the time. So it's just something we have to do, period, unless or until this stops, to have a constant regime like that. But that's why, because the moisture moves across the Pacific Northwest, and they will continue to seed here until they stop these programs, I believe.
So say it again, tea tree, citrus?
Okay, in a 2-ounce bottle, what we use is half a pack of the neti pot salts, 1 drop of GSE, grapefruit seed extract, 1 drop of eucalyptus oil, and 1 drop of tea tree oil.
Right.
So, and it's a potent mix, and it keeps for a long time. It's very inexpensive, and we just have to keep it up.
Absolutely. I will add to that when I use a wet mask, that's putting a Home Depot painter's mask, covering it with 2 washcloths that are folded in quarters and wetted. I add peppermint and cinnamon oil to that as well in between the washcloths, just for anyone who's interested. Thank you for calling. Appreciate your questions. And let's have our next caller. Go ahead.
Hi, Jane. This is David from Phoenix, Arizona. How are you?
Good. Thanks, David.
Good. In answer to the question that was asked earlier about how people are kind of lulled into it as far as depopulation, the Nazis basically used that tactic, just kind of slowly easing things onto people where they became acquiescent and pretty much there was no capitulation needed. They basically just fell right into it. But my question here is, I looked at some of the data of the particulates that are in Phoenix, and we're at aluminum, strontium, and barium, just for an example, 6,000% higher than we should be. And what kind of threshold is there where it's going to become incredibly out of hand? Because Phoenix seems like, I don't think that we're getting hit as hard as California or the West Coast, but I think that we are getting hit as hard as any others, which, you know, invariably it's all going to add up. But how much further can it actually go?
Well, I think we are nearing breaking points on a lot of fronts. I really do. And on your first part of your question, I don't deny that aspect of this scenario. I don't deny that at all. I mean, the population on this planet cannot be supported, and the statistics bear that out. I've looked at plenty of studies on that issue, and certainly those in power know it. So a culling of the herd would certainly seem to be something they think about. But I stress that they have, I believe, completely overlooked the ramifications to themselves. And now the methane issue, which I think that they felt they could control, and certainly the spraying that we see, the massive saturation of the poles, most specifically the North Pole, is so completely blanket covered, and the ice refreeze this year was so astoundingly rapid. Even though it's a surface freeze and the ice mass is not there. Surface area and mass, two different things, okay? So it appears, all available data appears they are trying desperately to put this methane genie back in the bottle. It is not going to go. So I believe that they know now that they have shot themselves in the head along with the rest of us. So now it's going to get interesting because they're going to be caught with a swamp full of alligators around them as well. So that's going to make it very interesting. As far as the amount of exposure that we can all handle, it's going to vary from individual to individual, certainly. But we see the ecosystem is now, the implosion is accelerating rapidly. So I believe we are at those breaking points. So the best thing each of us can do individually, try to keep those fungal infections from taking hold. Chelate, calcium and vitamin C even in big quantities is a good chelator. And then all the other, if you look this up online, I won't go into a whole other subject, but chelate and keep those fungal infections down with a constant regime of nasal spray and inhalation.
Okay, and what about colloidal silver?
Certainly to try to slow the perhaps some sort of systemic infection. I mean, I think silver is a good product. I really do, but if you can, you can alternate with colloidal silver nasal spray as well. But we found nothing that works like that mix I just went over, including colloidal silver nasal spray. Still, it's a great product. I support it, but the nasal spray I went over, and you could even put a little bit of colloidal silver in that to beef it up even more. But it's something we all need to do a constant regime on, though, because this stuff, fungal infections can be very, very slow and insidious, and you have to try to beat them back all the time.
Definitely. I agree with that 100%. And as a side note, I'd have to also add that I've lived here all my life. I was born and raised. And I have definitely noticed the foliage, the tops of the trees, and everything around me, absolutely everything has browned and is beginning to wither. And it's to a point of absolute insanity. I can't understand how 5 million people in Phoenix, and I'd say probably 2% know about it or even think about it.
I know I hear your words, and I feel your angst. Believe me, I know 10 years of my life I've had on hold, and I just simply have no other choice. But I would say we all must remember this, that we have to break this down to being a mission where each individual we wake up matters, that we know that somehow cosmically, karmically, somehow that matters, and so that we're doing this because it's the right thing to do, period, and the results aren't up to us, but it is simply the right thing to do. And one must look at it that way, because it can be discouraging to look at the the masses running around, grabbing their next six-pack for the next football game. And but if you find value in each individual whom you help to raise awareness with, you help to widen their field of vision and wake them up, it matters, each person, and cumulatively we can reach that 100th monkey.
Yes, I think about the exponential factor. I appreciate it, Dane.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, go ahead with your question, please.
Yeah, hi, Dane. It's Lexi Hunter. Thanks for coming on this evening. My question is, would you tell everyone, in your opinion, how long does it take when you see the jets emitting? How long does it take for the chemical particulates to descend?
Lots of variables there, but according to polymer chemists that I've communicated with, it can be as low as 12 to 24 hours. Now, that certainly is a far cry from the geoengineers claiming it can stay up there 2 years, which is absolute garbage. You can see this stuff coming down like a veil, under certain conditions. So, but there are other factors here. Again, I spend a lot of time in the woods. It's very remote here, and I've seen in the middle of winter a rare blanket of fog over Redding, California, Northern California's largest city. I saw KC-135 drop down to 7,000 feet up, absolutely dumping right over that urban area. Now, and this is at nighttime. So, what's that about? We can speculate, but based on the normal spraying we see at the usual altitudes, and the altitudes do appear to be coming down. They're spraying lower and lower, and so that descent time could be reduced. But it's I think on a normal scenario, Lexi, it's not long, 12, 15 hours. Maybe
okay,
less.
Thanks. I wanted to ask that question because I think people ask it all the time, and I wanted you to share your opinion with us. So thanks, Dane.
Thanks, Lexi.
One thing I'd love to add in about that, Dane, is being that I can smell and taste chemtrails as plainly as perfume, as amazing as it sounds, what's happened with me is I can I've done this for years, where I've stood outside for extended periods of time, and a jet would go by, and literally 30 minutes later, the plume would descend upon us. And the plume, the intensity of the plume, or the smell, or I should say, the smell and the taste increases to its maximum in about 60 seconds. It'll hit us, and it'll just ramp up. And then it will dissipate over 45 to 60 minutes. So it's kind of like if you graph the intensity vertically over the time horizontally, you get basically a sawtooth kind of a wave. And I've just, so as a result, we've done some experiments where we've taken toner from printers, which is supposed to be, I think, like 3 microns or something, very, very small, the little toner particles that go into laser printers, and like drop them off a roof onto white paper, and the particles appear there just within like a second. They just seem to go, even though it's like dust, some of it gets carried away with wind, but some of it just appears very, very quickly. And so I'm wondering if there's some component, at least in my observation, there must be some component that just must fall faster than the other stuff does.
I think you might be completely correct, Russ. And let me qualify what I said, because I don't dispute what you're saying at all. When I talked to polymer chemists, what we discussed was on the Welsbach patent that discusses a polymer fiber to help keep these particles aloft. And so we were discussing that mix, and we do see at the back of some jets 2 different composition trails, and this could be a mixing of these fibers. So we're assuming like the materials on a Welsbach patent, which, again, with the polymer fiber, and that purpose of that fiber is to mimic a spider web to help keep these particles aloft. So that is the scenario I'm talking about, and absolutely there could be multiple components to this that have a much faster descent time. So I don't dispute what you're saying at all.
Oh yeah, just something I wanted to share, just an observation, and also that there's 7 different odors and tastes that I've experienced that are identifiable, separate, have separate but overlapping symptoms. So definitely what's going on is pretty complicated, I think.
I think there's much to this equation we do not know. I no question that. And the fact this last nucleated storm we had here appeared to have something very different, because where the snow sat on ponds, again, we've been above freezing for, 12 days here now, and these ponds are still frozen, and this reactive material appears to be continuing to respond to the water that it's sitting in, and actually reducing the pond water levels in the last 3 weeks about 3 feet more than we would have otherwise seen. It's like gassing the water out of the pond and keeping itself frozen at the same time. And this, we're trying to deal with some chemists and a physicist right now to figure out what components this might be, but we're seeing some very strange stuff. Snow that sits in the ground does not melt. It just eventually evaporates. So I think they're willing to do anything at this point to try to stay off what they know they've triggered that will affect them as well too now. So I think they'll play any card they have at this point. If I could take, I hate to do this, but if I could take a couple more questions, then I have a few things I have to get at. But if I could take...
Absolutely. There's just one more. I was going to give you one more question and call it a day. Do you want to do that?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Here we go. One more question. So let's get the caller on. There you go. Go ahead, caller.
Okay, Dane. This is Helen in Georgia. And my question, more or less around the trees, some strange things that I've been noticing. It looks to me like the trees are almost buckling. I'm seeing the trunks, and they're, instead of where they used to look nice and straight, they just seem like they're snaking and just sort of almost collapsing. There's sort of a very slight S pattern to pine trees. I'm seeing it in hardwoods in instances. And I don't know. I mean, do you think this, what would cause that? Could that be like messing with the DNA of the trees? I had several large pines taken down around my home because I've had so many trees die on my property. They're just collapsing over with leaves that are still green. And I'm afraid, I became afraid that they would hit my home. But I saved some of the shredding when they mulched it up. And I was thinking I might send that in and have that some analysis done on that. And the other question that I have is something very strange that I'm seeing is in the Bermuda hay. It's a mix of sort of like a Bermuda grass just mixed in with a fescue from a neighbor that I bought this summer. And I've never seen this, but some of the grass is actually purple. There's like a maroon. It almost looks as if, whatever fell from the sky has discolored it in tiny little pinpoint, droplets. And it's actually, there's maroon color and purple. So I wondered if you knew what chemical might cause that, and then I'll just let you answer.
I don't, based on, those particular species and conditions. I mean, I don't know what would cause those colors, but I will say that we do know, as we stated earlier, fungal infection is becoming an issue with almost every species everywhere. So that's one aspect. The bioavailable aluminum, again, organisms try to shut down. That's why Monsanto has their aluminum-resistant corn and other seeds, because they just bypass the mechanism that shuts the plant down. So mutations can and appear to be occurring. These Norwegian researchers I mentioned are still preliminary in their studies, but they feel they are seeing horizontal gene mutation from the particulate uptake of plants. So that means at this point, if their data is correct, and it appears to be, there is no organic anything. Everything is susceptible to mutation at this point. Add fungal infection. I mean, it's a huge, huge issue. So to lump all this together, Helen, again, for a final summary here, we are absolutely in free fall to a completely different reality, and it's not a bright horizon. But that being said, if we could bring this to light and bring it to a halt, it would change the flavor of what we face. If people knew they were expendable, people of all political stripes and countries and creeds and colors, and raised awareness to that level, we could change the flavor of what we face and the overall outcome. Again, we talked about the exponential equation of these flaming arrows and locating people and groups and organizations. Doing more testing, I don't think at this point the time and effort you would spend at that. We have an absolute mountain of data, a mountain right now. Additional testing, I believe, is not our best time spent. There's enough. For anybody who's willing to look at the truth, there's plenty of truth here to look at. Our time is best spent shooting out the flaming arrows with the mountain of data we already have and the time we have. And again, if you told 2 people at the beginning of the month, and they told 2 the next day, each of them, and so on throughout that month, that's 5.5 million people after 30 days. My math is not wrong. So this is what we need to do. And if we all focused on that, we could, again, bring this to light. The vast majority of academia knows this is going on. They just simply need enough cover to find their backbone and come out from the shadows. Because we are on track right now for something called Venus syndrome. This is not a metaphor. It's a scientific scenario. And I think it's pretty self-explanatory. And this issue must be dealt with, or nothing else will matter. So I think we have more than enough data for any that are willing to look, pick the best based on who you're going to present that data to, and send out the flaming arrows. And each and every one of us can do that. And if we all focus on that, it will matter. And we can change the overall outcome here. It's going to be challenging. I don't want to hide that, but we can still have something to salvage here if we all pull together.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Helen. Dane, I know I want to let you go. I appreciate your time being with us today. You're always an incredible source of information. I've looked up on geoengineeringwatch.org/tests, TESTS, or they can just go to geoengineeringwatch.org and click the tests link at the top, and there is possibly the largest depot of tests there. There's got to be many dozens of tests there. Is that the best place to go, you think?
Yeah, and again, for flyers also, people can, that's very helpful, cheap to hand out, geoengineeringwatch.org/ADS, and you'll find various flyers there, because those can be made for 10 cents a piece, and have that data with you. And we have to raise awareness. There's more than enough data, so we should be focused on getting that out at this point. Thank you, everybody, for having me. Thank you, Russ, and I appreciate everybody's efforts.
Good, thank you. Everybody, please stay on. Dane, you have a good night. Thanks for joining us. You take care.
Thanks to all that are helping. Have a good night.
Good night. Okay, anyone else who is online here? Before we open up the session for everybody to talk freely with each other, is there anyone who would like to make any statements on this recorded part of this presentation that is going to be heard by people over the next many months and years? Press *6 on your phone. We'll take a couple statements and then open it up. If nobody's interested in doing that, then I'll just open it up and everybody can talk. We will have a meeting next week at the same time, 8:30 on Monday night. And I'm trying to line up another very interesting guest who's going to help us understand this issue. And especially, I'm trying to line up guests that are going to be particularly good for new people who've never heard about this before. I'm also working on a project to stream this conversation live on the internet, so you don't have to be on your phone. You can just open up a browser, go to the address, and listen in. So we'll see if we can get that working. I see nobody is interested in making any particular statements, so we'll end the recording here. I'd like to invite anybody listening to go to geoengineering.org or visit our own website, globalskywatch.com. If you go into the forum section of globalskywatch.com, there's a place where you can post your own tests, blood test, dust test, water test, publicly on our forum. If you have any problems with the posting process, just contact the administrator. We're more than happy to help. So I'm going to open this up. Thank you, everyone, so much for being with us. Join us next week and invite your friends.